Hello, you're watching MMA Crypt Fighting Talk. On today's show, we'll be going over 3 rounds of action, featuring various bouts from Ultimate Fight Night 36, in which we discuss fights such as Erick Silva and his devastating destruction of Sato. In round 2, we'll be discussing Ronaldo Souza's fight against Francis Carmont, and also Lyoto Machida versus Gegard Mousasi. And then in round 3, we'll be covering my favorite part, Ultimate Fight Night 36 Ups and Downs. Filling in for Gregory this time, I'm Matt, aka MMA Guru, and joining me today on the show is Brian Hunt and Greg Marshall. How are you guys doing this Sunday?
Awesome.
Doing
Good, good. Okay, let's kick things off with Erick Silva and his devastating destruction of Takenori Sato. Brian, what were your thoughts on that?
Impressive. Silva has impressed us multiple times and disappointed us multiple times. But he was a highly favored fight, and he ended it like he should have ended it. It's not one of these fights where it's like, okay, he should win, and it drug on. He did everything he could to end it as quick as possible. Put a period, exclamation point on it. It was a great showing. Just unique styles. He's fun to watch. When he's on, he's really fun to watch. I still think he's kind of the future of that division and somebody to be excited about.
Excellent. Greg, what were your thoughts?
similar to Brian. I thought he did it exactly what he could do. The guy was a big outsider to win the fight, despite being the current champion at Pancrase, which obviously shows the standard there's dropped drastically. But he did what he was expected to do, knock the guy or finish the guy in devastating style. It'd be interesting to see how they move Silva on in the division now. He's obviously, like Brian mentioned, he's win-loss kind of record, but his losses have been to genuine top guys. He needs to fight someone just outside that again, get a couple of wins in a row behind him now and move on slowly to up the division.
Yeah, Brian mentioned that he's fun to watch. He's got incredible energy, and he was even doing those kind of fun soccer heel kick things from the back last night. Greg, you mentioned that he was a major favorite. Do you feel like his up and down, good and bad, anytime I fight someone in the top 10, I tend to have trouble or lose? Do you think that takes away from his performance last night, or should we be optimistic in how he performed?
I think we should be optimistic. Obviously, when he fought Fitch was still ranked at, I think, number 2 or 3 in the world at the time when he lost there. So it was no shame to lose to Fitch. Kim was just a good punch, and I think the problem with Kim was that he just didn't expect Kim to have that. Nobody expected that really. That fight, he expected Kim to take him down and wrestle him. So I think it was just a complete freak, be it kind of result. But I think I'd like to see him fight someone like John Howard next, or Ryan LaFleur, just someone around about the 15 mark in the division.
Absolutely. Brian, it's been said recently that even with a win, Silva can really only be thought of as nothing more than a gatekeeper in the division, being as how his win-loss, and being at the age of 29, getting older in the division. What are your thoughts on that?
He might be the age of 29, but he's not carrying those MMA years, in my opinion. He does not look like a 29-year-old. The age aspect, he just reminds me of a 24, 25-year-old guy kind of coming up into MMA, and there's huge lights on him. He's gonna fall, and all of them did. He reminded me of GSP versus Hughes in some of those, in some of his other fights. Just not quite ready for that spotlight. I think he's going to learn from these. I really do think he is going to come up, and I think if that's a gatekeeper, you got to fight him for a gatekeeper to get into the UFC. Holy shit, the UFC division is good. I mean, that's crazy. So no, he's above a gatekeeper. He's way above a gatekeeper in my opinion.
Well, and you make a valid point that with him having not nearly as many years on him, even at 29, that it doesn't always, the age doesn't always mean their abilities. It just might mean that they've either had more or less time at that age of fighting. So he's definitely fighting at a younger fighter's ability. So, all right, that ends round 1. Let's move on to round 2 with Jacare Souza and Francis Carmont. Brian, what were your thoughts on that fight?
Yeah, it was a good fight. Jacare looked good. As good as Jacare looked, the potential for Carmont is huge. While he lost the fight, I have greater upside for him down the road as far as the future. Working with GSP, getting better wrestling, and getting confidence in his tool set. It's going to be exciting. But I mean, the key is Jacare. He won decisively. Rounds 1 and 3 were all him. I mean, just 100% him, and he's good for the division. I mean, his ground game has been untouched for years, but now he can stand and bang a little bit. So that's pretty damn scary. He's a very, very legit guy, and I don't know how big his window is. He has a window now, but how long is that window going to stay open? He's had a lot of fights. Maybe he's got a good TRT cycle going now or something. Hell, I don't know. It's kind of like a rebirth for him, but I like it. I don't think it's going to be a window that's open for very long, and we'll see.
Do you think that Carmont, especially in the second round, was displaying a little too much arrogance in that he potentially could have had a win there if he had taken the fight? Did you think that he took the fight less serious? I personally thought he wasn't being quite as serious as he might have needed to be.
No, he's a young kid in my opinion. He's not. It was a different level of a fight, and I think he's trying to psych himself up, versus relaxing himself, throwing a jab. I mean, a relaxed jab for a guy for that length of a guy could have done wonders, and he didn't. He was so tight. He was so damn tight, and he fought tight. He's got to relax. I mean, the guy's huge. He has a skill set that could be scary in that division. I mean, a guy that's cutting 25 pounds, not really cutting 25 pounds, but gaining 25 pounds by fight night is pretty freaking scary. So he's going to be good. He's just not ready yet.
Well, and he was on a pretty long win streak to begin with. Hadn't
Yeah,
fought.
11 fights.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't fought to a loss since 2008, and he really most recently beat who was at the number 10 spot, Costa Philippou. So, I mean, he definitely has a lot of potential. He did show a good fight for sure. Greg, I'm going to move on to the Machida-Mousasi fight. What were your thoughts on that?
I thought Machida did exactly what we expected him to do. Going into the fight, there was a lot of talk that Mousasi didn't deserve the fight, and that's how it looked to me. Mousasi fights with an aging style of plodding forward with little else to his game. He's not dynamic in any way, whereas Machida can be, where he steps in, lands a couple of blows, moves out, throws in the odd head kick, and he's just far more dynamic. Mousasi is starting to mirror guys like Dan Henderson, where he just plods forward, throwing a big right every now and again, and yet he does have more there. Where we've seen in the fight, he lands a few leg kicks, but he didn't follow up on them, didn't carry on with them. It's just he didn't look like he deserved the fight, and he didn't fight like he deserved the fight.
Right, absolutely, and when you consider the middleweight champion Chris Weidman defeated who many would consider to be the best fighter, if not the best middleweight of all time, a Brazilian, to now be paired up with another Brazilian in Belfort, potentially in the eyes of Machida to be paired up with yet another Brazilian if he makes it that far. Are the Brazilians going for a at all costs, all means necessary type of crowd to the middleweight title? Do you see either of these guys making much of a run to the middleweight title right now, Greg?
I think either of them could be genuine next fight for the winner of the Weidman Belfort fight. They've both got decent records recently. Souza has beaten obviously Carmont last night. He's got Okami, Kamosi, and Ed Herman in his recent wins. Machida's obviously beaten Munoz, and he's got the win over Mousasi. So you could justify either of them being the next fight. I think they might tend to go with Machida rather than Jacare, and the fact that Rockhold is another one coming through, and he lost to Rockhold before, so I think they might look to make the rematch there to determine the next contender. The other one's obviously Bisping that's coming through. I think if he beats Tim Kennedy, I think he might be Anderson Silva's first fight back. So I think Machida will be the next one.
So, and on that note with Bisping, do you feel like Bisping deserves a title shot sooner than Anderson Silva, or do you think that you would see the UFC leaning that direction based on Anderson Silva, really?
I don't think he deserves one sooner than Silva. I don't think he deserves one based on who he's going to have beaten. He'll have beaten Tim Kennedy, and he beat Belfort in his last fight. Before that, he obviously lost to Vitor. No, Belfort. He beat Belcher, and before that, he lost to Belfort. Anderson Silva's obviously just lost 2 in a row, so he needs a win. At least a win. I would say probably really needs 3 wins to get another shot at the belt, but a win over Bisping would probably get him that title shot again, and vice versa. If Bisping was to somehow score a freak win against Anderson Silva, you couldn't say that he didn't deserve a title shot.
Well, and considering, considering that Machida's only really stacked 2 fights up in the middleweight division, do you feel that he is legitimately a title contender like he thinks he is, or has he got a few more fights, Brian?
No, I don't think he is legitimate, because a lot of people didn't feel Mousasi deserved the fight. So beating a guy that most of us felt, not most, maybe that's not fair, but a lot of us felt didn't deserve to be in the ring with him. And he didn't finish him. He won decisively, in my opinion. Had it 4 rounds to 1. But sure, I mean, maybe it's not. He brings a style that will make any fight interesting going for a championship, because you're never going to know what's going to happen. So there's always that draw of it. I mean, I can't say he doesn't deserve it, because there's not a whole lot of guys that I'd put above him. Jacare might be the one guy that I'd put above him, but I don't know if he's hurt. I mean, there's some talk about a fractured foot, and Jacare seems more than willing to fight anybody right now. So it's worthy, sure. You're not going to get a lot of complaints from a lot of other fighters that have done more.
Sure. The hesitation that I sense probably mimics my thoughts that whoever they put him against, be it in a title shot or not, probably ought to push him a lot harder than Mousasi did.
And they will.
And I think that's safe to say for the majority of the top 5 in the middleweight division. All right, and that ends round 2 with a few minutes over. Hitting round 3, this is my favorite part. Ultimate Fight Night, 36 ups and downs. We'll start with Brian. What was your 1 up and 1 down?
1 up is Erick Silva, because when he's on, he is so exciting. He brings so much potential and energy to the cage. It's really fun to watch. So it was easy. Nothing else really excited me a whole lot from the fight, from the card. I mean, Oliveira looked pretty good, if I'm saying his name correctly. I don't think I am, but something along those lines. He looked good, but Silva, hands up. Down, the Fight Pass. I don't trust the UFC with the security of having to give a credit card to watch prelims, and I'm not a fan of that. They have piss poor security. Everything I hear it's better now, but it's still not great. And for me to put in credit card information to have to watch prelim fights, not a fan. Not a fan at all.
Absolutely not. Well, and my thinking is it's still in the free time, right? It's still free.
It is free, but I think you have to put your credit card information in there.
Yeah.
Well,
and there are several stories that they don't have a secure system.
My thought is just if they're still in the free trial time, why they're not multicasting through YouTube and through the website, I personally, I don't think I would ever subscribe to it even after it's not free and potentially more secure. I just have a hard time trusting places that have been flagged like that for having flaws. So I don't blame you there. Greg, your ups and downs.
Similar to Brian, the ups I'll start with. Erick Silva again. You can't really get more impressive than that. He went out there, he was expected to win, he did win, and he did win well. Even with the flashy little back heel kicks. Charles Oliveira, I was impressed with him as well. Andy Ogle's not the greatest fighter in the world, but he's a guy who'll fight with a lot of heart and will be hard to finish. And Oliveira struggled to finish him in the first round, despite having his back the whole round. Had a tougher second round, but in the third he came out and got the finish, and it's good to see him get back in the winning column and hopefully see him progress again. As for my down, that's an easy one. The whole performance of the night thing. They scrapped the submission and KO of the night because apparently it wasn't producing enough finishes. So they brought in performance of the night to make the guys go out there and finish fights. And we had as many decisions last night as we did last week. So it had no effect on the way it goes at all. These guys are there to win fights. It's a sport, and at the end of the day, win is king when you're talking sport, especially when your job's in the line, like it is at the UFC so often. If you lose 1-2 fights, you're looking at possibly being cut by the UFC. So the win is always going to be more important than an extra few pounds or a few dollars. These guys need to get wins to keep their career. The only way they're going to change that is by giving them more security in their fights, so that if they lose, they're not going to get cut, or possibly bringing in a finish bonus. Scrap these performance bonuses altogether and bring in finishing bonuses.
So how many incredible losses would you say would merit being cut?
Realistically, some guys are being cut after one fight.
Sure.
Especially if you're fighting if you've so the two guys that opened the card, opened the preliminary card, these guys would have been brought in on a one fight deal because they were both last minute signings. So they'll probably one fight deals. Now they probably had the chance to impress to further that contract, but is that the way forward? You want to give them security so that they can go out there and have a good fight, enjoy their fight, instead of worrying about where their next paycheck's coming from.
Well, and I think that kind of brings the division between spectacle and sport even further apart, because it takes away from the sport by feeling you have to provide a good spectacle of it. And I don't think that there's too much different between giving everything you have and giving a great show. However, especially in the case of Gegard Mousasi's appearance. But at the same time, I always want to maintain the spirit of the sport and the quality of the sport, and I think there's a tough line to draw between money and performance, and so that's definitely a good point. My ups and downs, I'll start with the downs because I like to end on a good note. My down is definitely going to be awarding the fight of the night to Machida versus Mousasi. Not a bad fight, not a great fight, not fight of the night. And maybe even just the cherry on top is Machida thinking that he's the next title contender. I don't know. Really, I think in changing the whole bonus structure in general, and then giving it to one of the worst showings for a title, not a title fight, but a main card fight that I think I've seen in a long time, really gives it a big thumb down. On the upside, though, I really was very impressed with Jacare's performance. It was honestly both of those guys. Really, I'm excited to see what Carmouche can do in the division. Or I guess Carmont. That's embarrassing.
You just called him a lesbian.
I did. I moved way past the line. But really, I mean, we talk about him, being new to the division. He just, in my opinion, destroyed Philippou. Had a great fight there. They both showed that the middleweight division is an exciting division to watch. Frankly, they should have been the main event. Frankly, they should have been the winner, as far as I'm concerned. So the unsung hero, Jacare was my thumbs up. So. And that brings us to the end of round 3, the conclusion of another edition of MMA Crypt Fighting Talk. I'm Matt Wolfley in for Gregory Stone. Thanks to Brian and Greg for joining me today. Be sure to check out all the prediction contests and fantasy bookies going on right now for UFC 170 at MMACrypt.com, as well as the Fantasy League Season 2, which starts March 1st. Drafts are on now. Thanks, everyone, for watching.